I want to thank everyone for joining. Today, we actually are going to talk about some calculations that you can use in Viewer that may help you with certain things. Notably speaking, mostly to do with how to display data that may not be part of the dimensions that you have within your view, but you can still display the data anyway, and you may want to for certain situations. So let's talk a little bit about what those calculations are and how they can help you with your data in case you'd want to do something similar and see data where it may not pertain to the dimensions that you're looking at currently, but at least you're able to still expose that data. And you'll see why you'd want to do some of that. Today we're going to look at a couple of views actually to look at what the point we're trying to make here in terms of how to do some of this. So I'm going to run a view here, basically using the latest version of Viewer, although you don't necessarily need the latest version of Viewer to do this. I'm going to go ahead and run this view called Open Orders Review by Customer. And then initially I get prompted to select a customer. As you can see, it's controlled by the parameter of asking me what customer I want to focus in on. So I'm going to select a customer from the drop down. I'm going to select Auburn Providers, click OK, and then the view will process and return to my screen. So here we have a view. We've got, as you can see, I'm filtered on the customer of Auburn Providers. Nothing really fancy there. We're drilled in on a warehouse in Omaha, and we're looking at all the products here that are being sold to this, or at least we have orders that are still open for Auburn Providers. So here we have the open order amount by product, by warehouse for Auburn, and then we've got some other open order measures as well, orders on hold, etc. But nothing really special here. We know that we have orders data by customer, by product. However, if we look further to the right in our view, we're also looking at inventory numbers. How is that possible? Well, given the fact that we don't store inventory by customer, typically you would not be able to see the inventory available, which is this column here actually. These are just hold units for our open orders. Available inventory, we can see that there's 158 units of applesauce. There's no available inventory for pork and the ground round. So these orders, we might have an issue fulfilling some of these orders here for those items where we can clearly see that there's no available inventory. So how is this possible? How are we able to show available inventory even though customer is being filtered within my view? Normally, that would not show. How are we doing this? Well, I'm going to open up the View Explorer. We're going to take a look at some of these calculations. If we look at the available inventory calculation, let's take a look and see what that looks like. So just basically looking at the properties of the calculation, we see here some documentation about the calculation. I don't know if you knew that you could actually document your calculations. You can put in a / and it essentially gets ignored so that you can actually document some things. So here, this is kind of nice actually because we can see that the first part of this calculation, we're actually just checking to see if open order measure has any data in it, because if it doesn't, then we don't need to do anything. So that's kind of what the first part of the if statement does. And then the second part here is if the product is null, then we aren't at the product level. So we might be aggregated at another dimension level. So we only want to do this calculation when we're at the product level. So that's what this portion of the calculation does. If we're at the product current member is product, then go ahead and make it null if it's not at the product level. And then finally, we want to ignore the customer dimension because we don't want to filter the inventory data on the we don't want to filter this inventory data on that customer. So we're actually using this language here to bypass or ignore that customer sold to level and just show the inventory number, in this case by product. And that's really all there is to it. Notice it's basically a tuple where we're just putting in this language of the customer sold to level with this default member identified. And that's really the magic that does that for you there. It also has in another dimension here, so if I drill the order number, it'll get ignored as well. So this part right here, these two portions right here actually represent order number and the customer sold to level. And then so you're able to actually do multiples here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you one later where we've got quite a few that we want to ignore. Okay, so if we didn't do that, for instance, if we were just to show the on-hand measure here, let's go ahead and show that. We're probably not going to get any data for that. And indeed, that's exactly what you're going to see typically right out of the box. Because, again, we're not storing the data at sold to level. So if we're filtered on a customer, then logically speaking, it really should not show here. But the Power of Viewer, we're able to actually bypass that and still show that inventory data right here in the available inventory column, which then allows you to do this type of alerting, and you can be a lot more proactive about your business. So that was really cool. I mean, in terms of just looking at data where, even though you're filtered on a specific dimension where that data doesn't exist, well, we can still show that, and we can still have that available so that we can analyze that data as needed. Let's take a look at another example. We're going to take a look at the sales to plan performance view. And again, I'm getting prompted here. I don't necessarily have to do this. I could just go ahead and just run this as is. And we'll take a look at this for a minute. What's cool about this view is that well, there's a lot of information obviously going on within this view, but if we look here, we can see that we're looking at salesperson, we're looking at product category. So by salesperson and product category, we can see our sales, how that compares to our plan. And it looks like the plan needs a lot of work. The difference between the two, difference percent, what our expected sales is, all this data, obviously should be available by salesperson and product category. We've got sales amount, we've got our plan amount, we've got our open orders. So that's all cool. What we're doing over here to the far right, as a matter of fact, is a run rate. So now some of our customers have the concept of a working day. So, and they only want to see how the sales spreads across those working days. Not calendar days, but working days. So how are we doing this? Well, Stratum actually has a measure. If you notice, here's one called System Control Values Number of Days. This measure is basically a measure that is stored only at the company level. So in essence, you could actually store your number of days here, number of days remaining, or number of days also behind you that you've consumed so far for the month, which is basically what this column here is showing. So similar concept here. Again, we're obviously filtering on salesperson and product category, and again, this as you can see, this measure not showing us any data because it's simply not stored at these two dimension levels. So kind of the same game we're playing here in terms of how do we show the system, these working days, even though we're not really storing it at these levels. How do we show it anyway? And again, the same concept here. If I were to actually right-click and go into edit mode here for this calculation, again, we just want to make sure that there's data there first, because if there's not, we can ignore it. And notice that work days are only available for company 100, so select those work days that are only at the company level. So we want to ignore the other dimensions. So here's that company 100. So we definitely want that in the mix, so the actual data will come back. But notice how we're actually listing out the rest of the dimensions within this view, and we're listing them out using that default member syntax, which will then essentially ignore all the other levels within this view that could potentially get drilled to. And that's really all there is to it. It is kind of a big beast, but as you can see, I can drill to any one of these different levels here, and I can still have, here I'm now at the product level. As I keep going into sold to, here I can see Wilder Foods purchasing the peach. I can see all the different sales numbers here, and then of course my run rate is still there. So again, I'm able to actually see this data even though I don't have it stored at these levels. I'm able to actually see this data anyway because of the syntax of that calculation. Okay, and then you got the run rate. So the run rate is essentially just sales over that working day so far, and that gives you kind of a average sales per working day calculation. This is based on the plan, and then also you can calculate or back into what do I need to achieve that plan, which is basically just the difference between those two columns. So pretty good stuff. We can see that we're able to actually not only show the working days, but we can actually calculate against it and have that. So we're actually mixing this data in with data. In all honesty, that's not even stored at this level, and we're able to still calculate against it, which is quite cool. It's a little mind-boggling, but essentially, it's quite powerful that you can actually take data that's really not stored at these levels and still manipulate it and still show it as needed. So that's a huge plus. All right, so let's also take a look at how you can apply a filter so you can only see certain data based on a condition. We'll take a look at certain things, some interesting things you can do here. This filter on a string view. What this does here is allows me to filter by expression. So if you are not familiar with how to filter we all know how to filter a product. We can just go in and filter and just pick and choose the different products that I want in my filter. Filter by expression, however, allows you to write an expression, and it will behave it's a dynamic situation here. This particular expression, notice I'm using an in-string function to look for some text in my description. Okay, so first of all, I want it to show all the items that have pair in the description, or show me any item that has 924 in it. Okay. So that's my condition here, and that's basically what it's doing. It's basically just showing me the products that have pair in the description. So here we can see that pair is in this description here, and it does not start with 924. But that's okay because we want every item that has the word pair in the description. And then we've got an applesauce item down here that doesn't have pair in the description, but it does start with a 924. So you can get quite sophisticated with these filter by expression calculations, and you can, every time I run this view, it will always check to see, where these items are, and to only return the items that fulfill that calculation or that filter. So the filter by expression can be quite powerful, and you can really do some interesting things with the in-string function as well, which is pretty powerful here. We're actually using it twice. Notice how the first in-string function is we're using that against the description, an attribute field, and then this one here is actually being used against the actual value of the level. So that current member dot name, that's your syntax to basically say, okay, I want to do the in-string against the actual product number, and that's what it's doing there. So that's the filter on a string, or filter by expression, where you can filter on a string of whether that's the description or the actual, the item itself or the value itself. A couple other things here we can see. This particular view here is kind of the similar concept here, except we're actually using it on the time dimension. So again, filter by expression being used here, and in this case we're actually just using it on one of the time dimensions on the month-based level, and we only want to see, if we look at this filter closer, we can see that we only want to see the months that have the word next month in it, or the word out, which means that it's 2, 3 months out, 4 months out, etc. So anything that has data in it will show up here, and also it will only show for the time dimensions that have the next month or the word out in it. So that's kind of the syntax here that you can use to accomplish that. So again, same concept here, filter by expression, but in this case we're actually using it for time. And in this case, then you can see what your current month, here we have a couple of calculations that are showing current month, and then for my time dimension, and these are distinct calculations. These are showing up current month sales even though it's not available here within my time dimension. And that's a whole other concept in itself, is having a measure show data here outside of the time dimension, which is what we're doing here. Here's the word, obviously the word next got picked up here, the word out, or next month, and then the word out got picked up here so that we can only see, in this case we only have data going 3 months out there. And so the following month, as I roll into November, this view will just roll with me. I don't really have to adjust this at all. It'll always stay like this as needed, and you can do some interesting, graphing based on what you have here. But again, the concept here is just using the filter by expression. We're basically just filtering the months based on the keywords of next month or the word out. So kind of a cool dynamic filter by expression concept there based on that expression. Similarly, we can see, we want to take a look at these all other examples. So here we can see, this is interesting too. So again, kind of the same concept here, except in this case we're filtering on a user list. So here we've got a filter, and we're only filtered on certain items within this user list. So that would be some sort of fruit items obviously are being, so you have a list of items essentially that you're focusing in on. The view here by division, by region, by salesperson, here's total product sales, and then here's my sales with the actual filter applied. So we can see that indeed these numbers are smaller than my total product sales for this food service division for this East region, and for all of my reps, it comes in at 31.2 mil. However, if I were to look at just the items within that user list, it comes in at 1.0 million, which is essentially 3% of total sales. Okay, and the all other items come in at 97%, which makes sense. Those two should actually add to 100%. So again, I kind of flipped it on its head here. Instead of filtering on one specific item or anything like that, we're actually now filtering on multiple items, and we're showing that number naturally here, which is what we would expect to see. However, to get the total product sales to show up here, well, isn't that interesting? Shouldn't that be filtered here by the my targeted fruit items as well? It should, but again, we're playing the same game here. If we were to take a look at this this calculation, we can see that, again, we're playing that same game with the product level, with the default member. We still want to see everything. So go ahead and just ignore the product level, which essentially ignores that user list filter, right? So nothing really fancy there. It's just flipped. It's just kind of the inverse of what we wanted to do initially. And this is showing us everything instead of just one thing or a list of things. And here you have the same concept for a trended view here. So same concept, it's just this view here is actually trended out using the time dimension, which allows you to see that with a filter, my items look like, this, 21 million up to October, January through October. However, for all items, it comes in as a 75%. Or I'm sorry, 75 million. So we can clearly see the differences by month now of the items within my user list and then all items. Okay. So again, if we were to take a look at this calculation, it's the same one essentially. We're just telling it to ignore product level by that default member syntax. So just because you don't store the data at certain levels doesn't mean you can't see it in Viewer, which is essentially, what these calculations do.
Unmuted.
Which is what we wanted to show you today. Is there any questions? I know it was a little short, which is kind of what I planned on, but powerful. And so, you can obviously see that, you can show data however you want. It's just a matter of you having the knowledge and the power to actually do that. Are there any questions? Anything similar that you wanted to do with your own data? Any questions at all? Don't be shy. All right. Well, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up early today. I know that it's a little shorter than usual, but again, we just wanted to concentrate on those calculations that were quite powerful for you, and we feel that you can take advantage of that.